As human beings in our modern age, our world looks substantially different than the one inhabited by those who came before us. The planet itself is much the same, but our knowledge of it has allowed us to utilize our resources to create a world our predecessors could not have imagined. From technological advancements to a wealth of knowledge available at our fingertips, this era has been dubbed the Information Age for a reason. This significantly changes our experience of what it means to be human, how we spend our time, what our day-to-day lives entail, and how much we can know about who and what we really are. And yet, we still find ourselves perplexed by the same curiosities as our predecessors, just with further context. Where our ancestors gazed up into the night sky and wondered where the earth fits into it, we have less to wonder about. Where they could easily imagine themselves as central, as important, as significant, we are presented with a different reality. Our view of Earth zooms out until it is barely visible, just a drop of light on the canvas of the universe. We see a boundless void, full of worlds many times greater than this one, and we experience a feeling of complete and utter triviality. We feel insignificant. Our predecessors did not have access to this modern perspective that our technological advancements have provided us. Their perspective was first person, while ours places people anywhere but first. It is not a moral judgment made by scientists for this to be the case. It is simply the view presented to them, just as our ancestors' perspective was simply what they experienced. This perspective shapes our view of life, and thus it is no surprise that, as our lens widens, our picture of human experience changes also. One of the places where this change of perspective occurred was in philosophy, where the picture of human experience is most wholly considered. With the place of humans becoming less clear, and our grasp on meaning beginning to slip, philosophers began grappling with existentialism, which is the feeling that there is not an objective, concrete, knowable meaning to life. Existential philosophers felt a desire for purpose that was not satiated by the world they resided in. And if there is no purpose to life, then suddenly our path as humans becomes significantly less clear. Many existentialists maintain that there is no longer a perfect road to follow, a definite sense of what we should do in our short time here, or any framework one can be fully confident in. We are left with only ourselves to determine what is right or wrong, true or false, good or evil. And this dilemma leads to the even scarier questions. What does living without purpose look like? Can it be done at all? Rather than attempt to answer these questions, most early existential philosophers assumed that we should ignore the apparent meaninglessness of life in order not to fall into despair. Some prescribed belief in a god, others recommended treating humanity as a god in itself, and still others worshipped science as ultimate meaning. Ironically, then, much of early existential philosophy was concerned with escaping existentialism. And truly, who can blame them? When confronted with a life filled only with our own lack of understanding, one's initial instinct is to tighten our grasp on meaning, rather than let it go. But not all existentialists sought to escape. Albert Camus, a philosopher who wrote in the middle part of the 20th century, did not shy away from the apparent meaninglessness of life. He acknowledged that this lack of purpose in the world was in conflict with the human desire for meaning, and he calls this contradiction the absurd. We yearn for there to be a meaning in life, and yet there is none. This concept was the central theme of much of his writing, with his focus being on actually answering and confronting these questions other existentialists shied away from. The absurd, while a different phenomenon from the meaninglessness we experience from our widening view of the cosmos, leaves us in a similar place, with meaning and significance stripped from us, and the question of how to go on at the forefront. An author who confronted these feelings from the cosmic perspective was Howard Phillips, H.P. Lovecraft. He created a unique genre of fiction, dubbed cosmic horror, where he tackled this experience of human significance slipping away when presented with our newfound astronomical knowledge. Lovecraft's focus was working to capture how terrifying living in this reframed reality truly is. Historically, our species tried very hard to see itself as central to the world that we reside in, and having to accept the exact opposite is daunting. The same terrifying questions about living without purpose that the absurd produces are similarly provoked, and we cannot help but wonder how to live a life without meaning or significance. This feeling of insignificance in the universe, or cosmic existentialism, is difficult to ignore when honestly considering the world around us, with the only real escape being to look away from the void and construct philosophies that give us a sense of meaning and centrality. Then we could continue to live our lives in safety, living on a planet in a small corner of the cosmos, telling ourselves that we are the center of it all. Thus, cosmic existentialism too becomes little more than just a feeling to escape. Lovecraft had no solutions for this daunting task of continuing to live in this world. His work was not meant to be a how-to guide for living in a scary universe. It was meant to convince others of the terrifying reality that we live in, and evoke the same feelings Lovecraft himself felt when observing the universe. Thus, cosmic existentialism has no answer, at least not from Lovecraft. But Camus had an answer for the absurdity of human existence, and it is my belief that his solution also functions as an answer to cosmic existentialism. But before we get to answers, we must delve deeper into the questions that I speak of. If we could defy all of our instincts to look away from the void, and instead stare straight into it, we might confront our meaninglessness and overcome our desire for significance. My name is Ben Fantuzzo, and this is my honors thesis on confronting cosmic existentialism. Here's a picture of the stars. I took it with my smartphone around 1 a.m. in northern Ohio, and though beautiful, it certainly isn't a unique view. It's one we all have when we gaze up at the night sky, give or take some light pollution. But then, here's another picture of the stars. This one was not taken by a smartphone, but by NASA space observatories. They're not similar pictures. Before we had such advanced technology to observe space, my phone camera, naked eye view, was the only one afforded to humankind. And even then, my view is clouded by modern experience. We understand space to be this massive expanse in which stars and galaxies dwarf our little planet, and it is through that perspective that we look at the stars. A less modern audience, on the other hand, had a different experience. Over 2,000 years ago, the ancient Grecian philosopher Plato looked up at the stars and saw a view not too dissimilar to mine. but he interpreted it quite differently than we tend to today. He saw in the universe a well-ordered creation, and a home in which humans resided. And furthermore, he saw in humanity a reflection of the universe, where the human body was modeled after the cosmos itself. He saw intelligence in the universe, imagining it as a divinity in its own right. Not one that creates, but one that was created by an even higher God in absolute and utter perfection. According to Plato, the creation of the universe harmonized the primordial chaos that had existed prior to it. He imagined the cosmos as heaven. That was the picture he painted with the view he was provided. It's a comforting picture. Plato, and many other ancient philosophers, humanized the universe. Rather than seeing the cosmos as separate, or even at odds with humanity, the ancients saw our existence as harmonious. Their perspective did not necessitate that the world be seen this way. I'm sure there were ancients who looked up at the same sky and imagined the cosmos in a less friendly fashion. But this perspective did at least make it easier to see the universe as something in harmony with humanity. And this harmony allowed us to maintain our sense of self-importance. For, after all, if we were created in the image of the universe, we had no need to wonder about our significance. The universe was seen and described in human terms, with our story being the central one. Everything revolved around us, in quite a literal sense. But of course, this view could not last forever. Galileo entered the astronomical scene during the late Renaissance and shattered the lens through which the human place in the cosmos had previously been viewed, that being one of centrality. The past 1,000 years had seen the rise of Christianity, which itself contained the assumption of human centrality in the greater universe. But it seemed this assumption was thwarted when Galileo discovered that the Earth revolves around the sun. Suddenly, everything no longer revolved around us, and we were just another planet. Galileo did not even posit these ideas in an attempt to lessen the significance of humanity's place in the universe. But those who sought to protect the pedestal upon which humanity sat knew what these discoveries would entail, and thus they infamously fought to silence and discredit them. Philosophers and theologians alike were not ready to dismiss geocentrism, as it aligned so perfectly with humanity's desire for significance in the universe. There was this unfortunate circumstance where this desire corresponded with our initial view of the cosmos. We wanted to be significant, and basic observations pointed us in that direction. We wanted the universe to revolve around Earth, around us, and it certainly looks like it does. Our planet feels as if it were curated for us, and this feeling was often expressed through religious beliefs about how the universe came to be. From Plato's divine creator to Christianity's Garden of Eden, it was a widely held belief for centuries that a god made the universe for us, and this belief is still held by many today. The sun and the moon dictate our days and nights, giving our world a rhythm and pattern to live by. The stars can be used to navigate our world if studied for long enough. Humanity's belief in our centrality was not only literal, but metaphorical as well. So as we observed that we were not literally at the center of our universe, dogmatic philosophers had to defend the metaphorical significance that we possessed as a species. Perhaps we were not the center of our solar system, but maybe our solar system was the center of the galaxy. Or perhaps science and reason were where the problem resided, not in our view of the universe. George Berkeley, a philosopher who wrote in the 18th century, posited that, as humans, our methods of cognition and understanding are inherently flawed, and thus, we can't put any stake in our observations of the world. Complexity in the universe for Berkeley is an act of God, a being so much greater than us, so it's no wonder that our mere human minds led us to the false conclusion that we're not significant to the universe. We should therefore trust dogma and scripture rather than human science. At least, that was Berkeley's conclusion. Even a century after Galileo, accepting his discoveries was no easy task. Because heliocentrism, the fact that our sun is the center of the solar system, made it much harder to view ourselves as inherently significant in the universe. We certainly still could. It was by no means impossible to continue to believe in a creation story or in any other system that gave humanity the foremost place of importance in the universe. But it was no longer so easy. Our scientific discoveries, which had previously pointed us in the same direction as our desire for significance, began to point us in the opposite direction. And this trend only continued as technology progressed. The 19th century and the Industrial Revolution brought even better technology, the result of which was better instruments to observe and understand the cosmos. Stronger telescopes in particular meant the heavens could be observed more closely, allowing us to understand our planet in a larger context. The astronomer Sir John Herschel formulated a geometric way to measure the size of stars in the night sky using their brightness and the power of the telescope. With this calculation, he discovered that there are many stars in the universe that absolutely dwarf our sun, which is a comparatively small star. We suddenly had a sense of the awesome scale of the universe that could not be appreciated before. Our view zoomed out even further, continuing to show us that we were just another planet revolving around just another star. And then the 20th century brought cosmology's greatest leap in knowledge since Galileo. Albert Einstein proposed his theories of relativity and quantum physics, off of which we discovered the expanding universe, theorized the Big Bang, and found evidence for black holes. This era also caused our view of the Milky Way galaxy to shrink. We had previously theorized that all of the clusters, nebulae, and other cosmic phenomena were within an imagined very large Milky Way. We found that these bodies were far outside of our mere galaxy, which is insignificantly small compared to some others we have now observed. And now, in the modern day, we have an even further zoomed out view of the cosmos. The James Webb Telescope, the most advanced space telescope to date, had its first images revealed in July 2022, and they're simply breathtaking. They capture light that comes from so far away that we are actually peering back in time, viewing what the universe was like 13 billion years ago. The universe dwarfs us in time as well as space. With the powerful telescopes, radio wave technology, and many other methods of observing the world that we now have, it is nearly impossible to see anything central about humanity's place in the universe. In fact, our universe may not even be unique. Based on quantum theories, some physicists speculate the possibility of multiverses, completely unique and separate from our own universe. And I am confident that, if someday we discover the existence of these multiverses, we will find ourselves not in the center of those either. More likely, we will find ourselves an even smaller speck of dust, an even paler blue dot, within an even wider expanse. Again, these discoveries do not remove the ability for us to believe in systems that emphasize our own importance, but it makes it nearly impossible to do so from a cosmological perspective. Astronomy and cosmology, which had previously pointed us towards our own significance, now leave us in a place of complete and utter obscurity, in a place and time decided by random chance and statistical improbabilities. Human significance now needs to be found outside of, almost in spite of, our cosmological knowledge. At this point, if we wish to see humanity as significant, it is easier to ignore our scientific findings, deciding instead to relegate them to a separate world from that which we consider our existence. Like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, it is much easier to say, just don't look down. But in this case, we're telling ourselves not to look up. Just don't think about the universe. Don't consider the world we live in. Think at a small scale, rather than the massive one that makes it so we can't even see ourselves. Zoom back in, take us away from the satellite imagery, and bring us back home to the view of the stars I took in my friend's backyard. Don't look up. Don't look up. Don't look up. Let's say it's too late. You've already looked up at the stars above you, and rather than try to ignore your own lack of significance and look away, you stare straight into the void that engulfs you. Where does that leave us as humans in the universe? Howard Phillips Lovecraft, who lived and wrote in the early part of the 20th century, was no stranger to honestly staring into the void. He was an amateur astronomer, and his observations of the world filled him with a deep sense of dread at the scale of the universe. He experienced cosmic horror, which is what we now call the genre of fiction that he pioneered. The story he tells acts as a perfect example for what lucid observation of the cosmos entails. What happens when we don't ignore our insignificance in the universe. He encapsulates not the feeling of having significance slip from our grasp, but the feeling of meaninglessness after we've already lost it. He encapsulates cosmic existentialism. Lovecraft writes as someone who chose not to ignore our cosmic reality and the scary questions that come with it. In fact, he did the exact opposite. He takes this reality and magnifies the most horrifying aspects of it. And so, having defiantly stared into the void and considered our own insignificance, we enter Lovecraft's domain, where the universe is far from a home for our species, and is instead a scary and indifferent world that surrounds us. In this picture that Lovecraft paints, one of the first things we experience is cosmic outsideness, this feeling that we simply don't belong in the cosmos. While the Earth itself can be viewed as a home for humanity, the moment we zoom out and look at the cosmos as a whole, this feeling dissipates. While we may feel at home among the plants and animals of our small world, the same cannot be said of nebulae and asteroids, solar flares and supernovae, black holes and neutron stars. Our celestial neighbors exist at a scale that is simply beyond what we are able to process as humans. We have certainly tried to make sense of them, and our scientists have made leaps and bounds of progress on that front. But truly comprehending these cosmic phenomena, reconciling our existence with theirs, proves to be a more difficult endeavor. Lovecraft uses the gods in his tales, who he calls the Old Ones, to demonstrate just how alien the cosmos is to humanity, and just how difficult this process of reconciling them is. In one of his stories, The Call of Cthulhu, Lovecraft largely omits physical descriptions of the Old Ones, to instead focus on the feelings they evoke in the humans who encounter them. The Old Ones are completely beyond human rationality. They are not composed of humanly understood matter. They have geometry that defies human science, and they simply are not conceivable to the human mind. The people who experience the Old Ones are understandably terrified, as their perspective through which they see the world, which they had previously had full confidence in, is suddenly shattered at the sight of these godlike creatures. Though the Old Ones are fictional, the ideas behind them are quite real. Lovecraft wrote The Call of Cthulhu in 1926, in the wake of Einstein's revolutionary ideas of general relativity and quantum theory. The former of these ideas especially has a tendency to bend the human understanding of the world we live in. The theory that space and time are just two sides of the same coin seems impossible to comprehend, at least from our human micro perspective. Every part of our lives and our experience has told us that these are two separate entities. And yet, here was a theory that stated exactly the opposite. Maybe on a physical, conceptual level, it's not too hard to understand, but reconciling that theory with our human experience is where the difficulty lies. This is part of what is beautifully horrifying about Lovecraft's work. It takes us away from our micro-level perspective and instead zooms out, giving us a perspective that seemingly mocks our human experience as short-sighted and oversimplified. From this new macro-level perspective, space-time is just another aspect of this massive universe that we have not yet fully come to terms with. We can understand it technically as just the way the universe operates, but just like the old ones, the horror is that space-time exists alongside us, in the same universe, and shatters what confidence we had in our human perspective. The only perspective we are left with is one that minimizes us and our existence. According to Lovecraft, this minimization is not the result of any sort of hostility. One could easily imagine cosmic gods who harbor a deep hatred for humanity, actively seeking their destruction. But this is not the picture that Lovecraft decides to paint. In most of his stories, the Old Ones are not actively aggressive to humanity, no more than we imagine ourselves aggressive or violent when cutting the grass in front of our houses. The timeline and level of intelligence at which the Old Ones operate makes them far too advanced to consider our existence meaningful. They have existed for millennia, just as our universe has. Eons and eons, billions of years. To the Old Ones, we are insignificant. They are simply beyond the limits of human accomplishment and understanding. In the same way, the cosmos is not actively hostile to our existence, but it certainly has the capacity to destroy us in its awesome power. What would it take? An asteroid that just happened to be on the wrong trajectory at the wrong time? A supernova explosion close enough to burn through our atmosphere? Even just the eventual decay of our sun? Lovecraft's picture is one of human littleness in the face of the cosmos, and this insecurity in our own existence is part of what makes accepting that insignificance so horrifying. If we instead imagine that the universe is friendly to us, that it exists to be a home for us, that humanity is ultimately important within it, it's much harder to imagine it wiping us out. But with the macro perspective that Lovecraft uses, humans become vulnerable, and our existence feels much less secure. Cosmic existentialism stems from this perspective, as through this lens we become no more than specks of dust, upon a speck of dust, within a speck of dust, and so on. And once we see reality in this fashion, it's nearly impossible to return to the comfort of our micro-level perspective. In this way, horror results from awareness. Lovecraft captures this feeling in his story, At the Mountains of Madness, where a group of scientists on an Antarctic expedition happen to encounter the Old Ones. This encounter leaves one of the main characters so mentally broken that even after escaping the direct influence of the Old Ones, they still succumb to madness and are driven insane. Once we have gazed into the void, we find it difficult not to let it consume us. Observation of the cosmos and acceptance of our insignificance leaves us with this horrifying macro perspective, and we find it a daunting task to zoom back in. When we try to look away, we find it's too late, for the void is all around us, and we find ourselves within it. Similarly to the ancients, Lovecraft's picture of the universe was heavily influenced by his perspective. He personally witnessed the widening view of the cosmos that minimized humanity's existence, and the horrifying picture of littleness that he presents to his readers was the result. So unlike the ancients, who humanized the universe, Lovecraft dehumanizes the universe. He shows all the ways that the cosmos is just simply beyond us, just so much more than us. Rather than imagining the cosmos in human terms, he imagined it as something beyond human rationality, because this was the perspective from which he viewed the cosmos. Lovecraft sought to share this perspective with his readers, letting us feel what he himself felt when looking up at the boundless void in the night sky. Rather than seeing harmony between humanity and the universe, Lovecraft saw dissonance. He saw contradiction. So this is the picture that Lovecraft paints, one where humanity's meaninglessness is obvious, and our insignificance is all-encompassing. He tells us that our lives are mere accidents, pointless fluctuations of matter, on a rock floating in a small corner of space that will eventually be consumed by the star that gives it life. This is the perspective that those who feared the slipping of human significance sought to avoid, one where our existence in the cosmos is terrifying rather than comforting. Once we have given up on maintaining our centrality, this is the view we are left with when observing the night sky. This is cosmic existentialism. Lovecraft gives us this perspective, tells us to consider our human existence unimportant and horrifying, then leaves. His worldview is fully descriptive. He paints this awfully pessimistic picture and then makes his exit. He has no prescriptions. He gives us no way forward to living in this terrifying universe that he describes. Perhaps he did not have a way forward, or perhaps it is because his works were that of fiction rather than philosophy. But regardless, it leaves us with this question: how do I go on? How do I keep living in this world in which my lack of significance turns it into an indifferent void? Lovecraft doesn't tell us. Is it possible at all? Can we go on after looking up? I think it's difficult to really take these questions seriously sometimes. Even when explicitly focusing on the subject of meaninglessness, it's easy to fall into the trap of relegating it to some other existence of hypothetical and metaphor, to make it a glorified thought experiment. To be fair, that's easier than doing the real thing, than accepting the higher stakes. It's easier than putting ourselves in the picture. There's this desire to tackle the idea of meaninglessness in a fashion where we're safe from its consequences. But let's brave the cold together and ignore our desire to turn away. Here's where our astronomical knowledge left us. It deprived us of our significance once we brought ourselves to look at it, and our insignificance left us in Lovecraft's world, where our lack of centrality causes the universe to be uncomfortable at best and indifferent at our most honest. Our existence within it becomes a source of fear, of horror. The vast cosmos does little to coddle us. There seems to be no escape. The quantum multiverses of theory don't quite have a direct flight option, nor a bus route. This is the universe in which we must live. And so I only ask, how? This setup presupposes that we maintain a sense of honesty. After walking into the darkness, many have deemed it easier to turn back. If acceptance of insignificance means that Lovecraft's picture of the human place in the universe becomes reality, one could be forgiven for denying our insignificance at all costs, even in the face of continued discovery of human obscurity. But this is little more than escapism and purposeful ignorance. It is staring into the void and then faltering at the last second and deciding to turn away, pretending it's just not there. But can we maintain eye contact? Yes, Lovecraft's picture is scary, but is pretending it away really the only way forward? Or can we confront cosmic existentialism? In our journey of confronting insignificance, we find many sets of footprints we can follow. Meaninglessness is encountered in many forms, of which our cosmic reality is just one. Greater souls than I have walked these paths, and in their confrontation with meaninglessness, we might find wisdom. Few sets of footprints can lead us quite as far as those belonging to Albert Camus, a French philosopher who wrote in the middle part of the 20th century. His confrontation with meaninglessness, though different than ours, is laced with similar themes. The central difference is that, at the end of painting his picture, Camus shows how we can move forward, how we can keep living. So perhaps Camus' methods can shed insight onto our struggle as well. Camus' philosophical endeavor was one against despair, that state where we no longer see any reason to keep living life. He states that we all yearn for life to have some meaning, that this desire is inherent to the human experience. We naturally seek out explanations and descriptions, and anything that can reduce this life into something we can understand. We have this internal desire for our world to be comfortable and familiar, to have easy answers so that we never have to question why we're here and what to do about the fact that we are. Camus states that this human desire for meaning goes unanswered by the world. Search as we might, we cannot answer every question, nor make everything familiar. The world, in fact, seems completely devoid of meaning or purpose. Human existence is full of discomfort and unfairness, to put it lightly. And at the end of it, even if our existence is somewhat comfortable, we are left with only death at the end of it, which, try as one might, is inescapable. Life is a foregone conclusion. This too we tend to keep out of our minds. Between our desire for meaning and the world's apparent meaninglessness, Camus states there is a contradiction. He calls this contradiction the absurd, for that's what it is to him. It's absurd that the thing that we inherently desire from this life is absent from it, and yet we're asked to live anyway, to keep going somehow. Like cosmic existentialism, the absurd can be avoided. In this contradiction between humanity and the world's lack of meaning, the scales may be tipped to upset the balance. The main way of doing this that Camus criticizes is by hoping for an ultimate meaning out there, that death is not permanent as all of our senses indicate to us, and that there is something more than life. Life does not justify itself, and so some people seek something to justify it. There are a variety of systems available to us that claim to answer every question, if only we could believe that which we cannot experience. But to Camus, this is just escapism. The absurd, the tension between our desire for meaning and that lack of meaning in the world, is born out of that which we can experience. We feel this desire for meaning. We feel that there is none. Imagining some justification outside of our experience is little comfort, as these feelings do not disappear. Those who advocate hope of something more than life often do so because they believe that avoiding the absurd which is brought on by a lack of meaning, is the only way to live in this world. Hope gives us the opportunity to exit, stage left. We can leave this theater, take a leap beyond our human rationality that asks us why there is no meaning to life, and yet so deeply desires one. To many, hope of something else is the only way forward, because acceptance of the purposelessness of life would make it not worth living. For them, the only choices they have are to escape the absurd or succumb to despair. But Camus disagrees. He states that despair does not necessarily follow from the absurd, and that the latter can be accepted while still avoiding the former. Camus does not deny that this means living without hope, but a lack of hope for something more than life is not the same as despair. Despair is stating that life is not worth the trouble, not worth the effort. Hope, in a way, admits this is truth. It states that there is something other than life out there that makes it worthwhile, a grand system that explains our existence, an afterlife that promises to be greater than the current one. But Camus' solution is not one of hope. His goal is to stay firmly planted in this life without making a leap beyond it. To do this, the absurd cannot be avoided. We must acknowledge the meaninglessness of life without turning away, that life really is a struggle whose only finality is death. In the face of this reality, what way to move forward is there? Camus' answer to the absurdity of existence is revolt, defiance at the apparent meaninglessness of the world. Truly living this life means accepting it fully. Instead of ignoring the scarier aspects of life, we should constantly acknowledge and confront the absurd. The fact that our desire for meaning goes unanswered by the world makes living within it a struggle. But by maintaining this struggle, by living in spite of having no reason to continue, we transform this life into a battle against the absurdity of existence itself. This absurd reality gives us only one certainty, that our existence within it is impermanent and meaningless, and that this reality defies our deepest desires. But in that pure effort of continuing on regardless, of having no reason to go on but choosing to go on anyway, we transform the struggle itself into our truth, into our way forward. Camus emphasizes the importance of lucidity in reframing this life into a mindset of revolt. In being conscious of the absurdity of our existence, we see that the deck is stacked against us, and the house always wins at the end of it. And yet, we refuse to quit. Camus states that it is essential to die unreconciled and not of one's own free will. When the game of life eventually ends, it should be because we have exhausted ourselves to the very end of our abilities. If the world wishes to kill us, it should have to work for it. This is the essence of revolt, turning our invitation to give up into kindling that keeps the flame of our motivation to live burning. A mindset of revolt is very different than hope of something other than life, because this earthly life itself is all that has value to Camus. Systems of hope necessarily deprive life of its beauty, as they devalue this life for the sake of some future metaphysical one. In recognition of life's definite finitude, we are predisposed to extracting all the experience and value we can from it. Our time is numbered, and thus we have no time to waste. Life's value is then found in living, in experiencing life as much as possible, but doing so consciously and lucidly, living with full knowledge of its difficulty, of its struggles, of its finitude. For Camus, there is no substitute for living, even in a life as bleak as this. Thoughts of escaping our fate do not give us comfort. Rather, it is in full knowledge of our fate that we are given our way to continue. It is not comfort, nor is it a reprieve, but it is more honest than the false escapes presented to us. In this lucidity, we affirm the pure flame of life is where value lies. In our refusal to pretend, We brighten every aspect of our existence we refuse to ignore. An existence that leads only to death from the hand of an indifferent universe. But this existence is full of love for life and the desire to keep living it. In this way, we thwart despair. We have no reason to wonder what the point of life is, for life is all that we desire. We do not desire an escape, neither divine nor the release of death. We desire to stay. In this existence, in which we have only death to be certain of, we wish for nothing but to live. So how does this help us in our quest to confront cosmic existentialism? Well, there are some clear similarities between cosmic existentialism and the absurd. Both entail inherent human desires that go unanswered by the world. For the absurd, this desire is for meaning. For cosmic existentialism, this desire is for significance in the universe. Both are also difficult things to confront, leading many people to attempt to ignore them instead of accepting them and their consequences. And both ideas involve how we frame reality, how we interpret the way we exist. These similarities allow us to apply Revolt, which is itself a reframing of reality, to cosmic existentialism. There is a distinction to be made between these two concepts, though, that being their perspectives. Camus' picture of the absurd is at a small, personal, micro-perspective, where each individual must confront their own internal desire for meaning. Lovecraft's picture, on the other hand, is at this massive, species-level, macro-perspective, where we must confront the lack of significance of our entire species' existence. But these confrontations are similar. They both involve ignoring more comforting lenses through which we could see our existence, because we wish to see the world honestly. Thus, the idea of lucidity connects them. Lucidity is the root of Camus' Revolt, consciousness of a reality that is contrary to our most inherent desires. So, in our cosmic reality, we have something to defy, something to revolt against. Our littleness in this massive universe, and the way it makes us interpret our existence. The outcome Camus attempts to avoid is despair, a state of mind where we see no value in continuing to live. And Revolt is his way of overcoming it. Cosmic existentialism does not quite lead to the same despair. Painted through Lovecraft's lens, our lack of significance becomes a reason for horror and fear in the face of the universe we find ourselves in. This is the outcome we seek to avoid by this confrontation. And so, using these similarities, can we frame our reality in a way that we revolt against cosmic existentialism, our lack of significance in the universe, in order to allow us to live in the universe without horror and fear at our place in it? Revolt against cosmic existentialism, or cosmic revolt, as I'll call it, is born of our consciousness of our desire for significance, and that all of our scientific knowledge has led us to a view of the universe in which we are unimportant. But rather than trying to ignore this fact, we confront it. We keep our insignificance at the forefront of our minds. This insignificance should, by all rational accounts, lead to a picture of our place in the universe like the one described by Lovecraft, one of insecurity and vulnerability. But what if, in defiance of this fact, we see the opposite? What if, when we look up at the stars, we see beauty? This beauty that we witness might wipe us out in an act of complete indifference to us. But even Lovecraft, for all his pessimism, admits that this indifference is not hostile. Camus describes our world as a place of benevolent indifference, and we should apply the same framing to the cosmos. The universe might not be a home for us, but we live in it regardless. And more than that, we explore it. We send out satellites and rocket ships. We wish to learn everything that there is to know. If we do this not in an attempt to thwart our unimportance, but instead, in full awareness of it, we revolt against this insignificance that demands that we avert our gaze. We decide to keep staring and discover all the beauty and wonder present in a cosmos that dooms us to a fate of triviality. Because rather than deny this fact, we humbly accept our place in the universe and choose to see the beauty regardless. The universe is still dehumanized, but must we still see beauty in only the human? I think not. The fact that we, as finite beings whose lifespans make up the tiniest fraction of the timeline of the universe, get to witness its grandeur and feel awe at its magnificence, should bring us joy rather than horror. Having adopted cosmic revolt, we have no need to lie to ourselves about the void, nor must we let it consume us. We have no need to cover our eyes, nor to gouge them out. We can truly observe the universe, our insignificant place within it, and have no imagination of being the rulers of it, or having it bend to our will. We can instead understand our place in the cosmos as explorers, finite beings within the infinite expanse. In spite of the fact that staring into this expanse confirms our insignificance, we see so much beauty that we look anyway. In that moment of conscious defiance, the void does not disappear, but brightens into a world full of opportunity. Opportunities for passions, for happiness, for value independent of significance. This earth, this speck of dust we inhabit, Sagan's pale blue dot, is enough for us. We do not ask for more. We need not let the stars be a source of horror, for after confronting cosmic existentialism, our defiance is found in seeing our universe not as terrifying, but as beautiful.